back to Brighty of the Grand Canyon. This is Battle on the Mesa. See, there's some donkeys up there, some burros up there. Brighty stood quivering, with the river streaming by behind him and men on the opposite shore starting to cross. He could feel Uncle Jim's hands undoing his braids, and he let the hands work as he might let a butterfly light on him. It was as if Uncle Jim belonged to a faraway times and places, while he, Brighty, faced the wonder of a whole new world. His eyes traveled eagerly up and up the south wall, and his ears were pokers into the future. He swung them to and fro, and he had a rapt look as though listening to a melody half remembered. This south wall of the canyon seemed like, yet strangely unlike, the north, and while his eyes climbed, 3 wild burros suddenly ran out on the little mesa above and stood staring his way. Glancing up, Uncle Jim caught sight of them, and he too gazed fascinated. Their ears showed stiff and erect over the brink of the mesa, and for a long time the 3 stood frozen. Then the creature in the middle rose up on his hind legs like a boxer ready to fight. Brighty pulled in a breath. His body began to shake. Uncle Jim chuckled. He brought his hands down on the burro's back, half a pat, half a shove. "Go ahead, boy. Might do you good to mix with your own folks. It's only right and natural." With a snort of ecstasy, Brighty leaped forward and started racing up the wall. He was terrified that the creatures might not wait for him. He bounded from crag to crag, trembling with excitement. When at last he clattered up over the lip of the mesa, he saw that the 3 jacks were not alone. Dark-eyed jennies and colts were huddled in little bunches behind them, but it was the big, black, snorty fellow in the center that held Brighty transfixed. He was hypnotized by the fire and frenzy of the jack. He slowed, approaching cautiously. At once, the black drove the 2 small jacks into the bunch. Then, with a bellowing whistle, he came charging the intruder, yellow teeth, bared sides going in and out 4 feet, raking the air. In joyous rage, Brighty met him head on. It was a fight, the big, battle-scarred veteran against the gray rookie. Like men in a ring, they sparred, dancing, punching, interlocking, breaking apart. Behind the fighters, the eyes of the mares gleamed darkly. They saw hooves strike down home at ribs, at chests, saw jaws rip pieces of hide, saw drops of blood stain the sand. Screams echoed down the canyon, followed by rasping grunts. Then the dull sound of bodies meeting again and again. The black's breath rattled in his nose. He meant to kill the gray stranger, to fasten his teeth on the throat, to puncture the big vein. He fought with cunning, biting at Brighty's legs to get him down, then going for his neck. Twice Brighty's knees buckled and the black tried to seize the vein, but Brighty wrenched free, only to take a fresh battering of hooves. Again he went down. This time he pulled the black with him, and for a few seconds sucked in the air his lungs craved. Each breath was a quick surge of power. Now he was up again, but the black lunged at him, pushed him toward the edge of the mesa. For an instant, Brighty caught the red warning of the abyss. He slewed around, using his 4 feet as ramrods, kicking out in wild fury, giving his foe punch after punch in the ribs. With a groan, the black fell heavily on his side, and the wind knocked out of him. Only a moment Brighty stood over him. Then the defeated jack picked himself up and limped off. And suddenly Brighty heard his own voice sounding the triumphant bray of the victor. The jennies and colts stirred apart, some answering in sniffles and some in high whinnies. Brighty did a quick leap skyward. Instinctively he knew that now he was their leader. A new world for Brighty. There it is. A new world for Brighty. There's this little pack, his little herd with him. The world suddenly opened out for Brighty. It was a new kind of freedom, a freedom charged with power and strength. He was king in his realm, big beyond belief. The Tonto Plateau hung like an enormous shelf on the south wall of the canyon. It spread flat and green, so different from the canyon he had known. He could look out upon acres and acres of sagebrush and cactus, and then up at the pyramids that rose like a throne at his back. Brighty had never set foot on a mesa before. The immensity of it gave him a wild spirit feeling. He raced his band of mares and colts across it, and for sheer fun he skirted them dangerously along the edges where the walls fell off vertically into black space. Every deep-drawn breath was exciting. Instead of one trail, there were hundreds of tiny corkscrew trails worn by the feet of many burros. Years ago, they had been turned loose by miners and trappers and now lived in wild bands, but so vast was the mesa there was room for all. Brighty traveled like a king on the land. He explored the labyrinth of trails. Some he found criss and crossed, ending up nowhere at all, but others led to fine watering places. Here he took on the full stature of ruler. He and his flock approached a spring. He tasted the wind, sampling it for the scent of enemies. Had some rival Jack preceded? Was he hiding in ambush, ready to steal Brighty's newfound family? At the first scent of a foe, Brighty wheeled his band in the opposite direction, sometimes nipping the mares and kicking at the foals to force them to safety. He brooked no foolishness. He knew that suffering thirst was better than fighting to the death. But often as not, the breeze blew fresh. Then they all ran snorting to the water, drinking their fill and afterward rolling in the mud around it. Brighty was an intelligent, devoted father, and he and his family lived in a little paradise of their own, a world of sun and plenty in the heart of the canyon. Sometimes days passed without their sighting another living creature. But even when their world seemed snug and secure, Brighty's eyes forever searched the distance, picking out movement miles away. An eagle coasting down the sky, a coyote or wolf mounting a rock to look for prey. Early in his career as leader, Brighty developed his own signals. A rumbling snort meant all's well, but a shrill cry said, "Danger, mares! Bunch up! Gather in your colts!" The Jennies obeyed in a flash. At the first alarm, they flew around in a whirling vortex, herding their colts into dead center. Meanwhile, Brighty turned on the wolf or coyote, driving him off with savage ferocity. There were man enemies, too. Indians crept soundlessly on moccasined feet, trying to steal the burros. They were smarter than wolves, coming always when the wind blew their scent away, but Brighty lost only a few foals to them, for his eyes were sharp and the mares and colts could outrun the fleetest Indian. Gradually, his youthful gaiety gave way to sharp watchfulness. A new Brighty he was, able to size up an opponent, sensing instantly whether to fight or flee or merely to stand defiant. Outwardly, too, he changed. He became thinner, shaggier, and hair over his eyes bushed out, giving him a wild, fierce look. When the wind ruffled his coat, it revealed the scars of many battles. The days came and went, winter and summer, cold and heat. For 3 long years, Brighty stayed with his flock. The urge to migrate was stilled. He seemed to forget the world of men, the lion smell of Uncle Jim, the beaver smell of Jake Irons, and the sugar cane sweetness of Homer and the children at Wiley's camp. There was room in his mind for only his mares and the little foals he had fathered. And then, in the middle of a sunlit morning, Brighty's new world came crashing down. He had closed his eyelids to snatch a moment's sleep. It was a windless day with the wind warm to his face. His family was within easy calling distance, and he dozed standing while the soft sounds of the colts suckling and the mares grinding the sagebrush lulled him deeper into sleep. At first there was only a far-off speck on the wall above, a speck as still as a winter fly. Then slowly it began crawling down the wall, and as it crawled, it quickened pace. Brighty woke to sigh and to shift his weight. He took time to scan the cliffs above, but just as he did, the oncoming figure passed from sight around a turn. Grunting in contentment, he closed his eyes again, feeling safe for the moment and lazy. So still was the wind, and so deep his sleep that he neither smelled nor heard the soft-footed thief approaching. Then all at once his blood curdled to a ringing scream. Instantly he was sharp awake. A glance told him that here was a foe he had fought before, a young Palomino Jack, easily defeated. Brighty filled his lungs and let out a bugle cry that sent his mares into a huddle. Then, with ears laced back, he rushed at the young stallion. The air, so peaceful a moment ago, suddenly became a sandstorm with dust rising, little stones spitting, and hooves lashing out like forked lightning. Within the sand cloud, Brighty's breath hurt in his lungs, his nostrils smarted, and his eyes burned and watered. He blinked furiously, trying to see which way the hammer blows were coming, but the sand blinded him, and he seemed never to duck in time. The young Jack caught him blow upon blow, then raked and ripped him with savage teeth. Brighty flailed wildly and missed, and then in the very heat of the fight, he deliberately slowed his hoofs. It was as if he suddenly realized the young Jack had grown in bulk and weight, while he himself had faded. He knew it was impossible to win. It could only be a fight to the death. Struggling free of the battering hoofs, he burst out of the sand cloud, running desperately toward the river. 2 Jennies started after him, but the Palomino drove them back into the bunches. The shrill bray of the conqueror sent cold shivers down Brighty's spine. With never a backward glance, he stumbled his lonely way. His shoulders were streaked with blood. His whole body ached, and defeat hung heavy upon him. Wow, what a set of stories. There it is. That was 2 stories there out of, or 2 chapters out of Brighty of the Grand Canyon. By the way, here's a map in the back that shows you a little bit of what's going on there. There's Ribbon Falls and all of that. Hopefully you can see all that. That'll give you an idea kind of where Brighty was. There you go. Be back later. Bye.